about peace was a lie. A child torn from her home, raised among those who promised safety, only to find that behind their kindness was a battlefield. From the ashes of betrayal and loss, she rises, stronger, sharper, unstoppable. This isn't just a fight for survival. It's a fight to become the very hope she was denied. Stay with us, because the truth begins where the lies end. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Let's move toward wonderful story. Rion was only 8 when the sky over Dalis turned from soft orange to fire. She remembered it clearly, the way the clouds tore open with streaks of silver light. Her people had never known war, not truly. Their planet was peaceful, filled with music, gardens, and shared meals. But peace shattered quickly when the swarm descended. Ships rained down like metal thunder, and the horizon glowed with explosions. Her parents grabbed her, whispered promises of safety, and pushed her into the arms of uniformed strangers. That was the last time she saw them. The humans had come in ships of steel and smoke, their faces tight with purpose. They called themselves protectors, part of something bigger, the Pangalactic Federation. They promised shelter and survival. They told everyone not to be afraid. Ryan tried to believe them, even as she watched her home disappear in the distance, a burning jewel lost among stars. The refugee camp was nothing like home. It was gray and flat and filled with noise, loud engines, harsh voices, cries at night. The tents were cold and smelled of plastic. Ryan was placed with a dozen other children in a corner of the camp where the wind never stopped howling. The humans gave them food, uniforms, and short lessons in their language. They said it was only for a short time, that soon the children would return to something better. But time moved strangely in the camp. Days became weeks. Weeks became cycles. And still, the tent stood. She met Kira by accident. The human girl had been trying to climb a broken cargo crate when she slipped and landed face first in the mud. Ryan had helped her up. They didn't speak the same language then, but laughter didn't need translation. From that day on, they were inseparable. Kira was brave and wild, always exploring the edges of the camp or sneaking into the Marine base to watch soldiers train. Ryan followed, uncertain but curious. The Marines were like thunder in human form. They marched, shouted, and carried weapons bigger than Ryan's arms. But some of them smiled. One of them, a tall man with gray streaks in his beard, noticed the 2 girls peeking from behind a wall. Instead of chasing them away, he tossed them ration bars and said, "Little shadows need to eat too." His name was Sergeant Malin. He didn't talk much, but he watched over them. He taught them how to throw a ball, how to whistle through fingers, and how to stay out of trouble, most of the time. Ryan began to feel a strange kind of comfort in the camp. It wasn't home, not really, but it didn't hurt like the first few months. The humans called this comfort normal, and Ryan started to believe in it. Kira said that soon. They would go to real schools, fly real ships, maybe even leave the camp behind. But every time someone asked the humans when that would happen, the answer was always the same. Soon, new buildings appeared. Concrete, replaced tents. A cafeteria opened where the food used to come from crates. A small learning center was built near the southern edge of the camp, filled with books and old computer screens. The children were told this was progress, that they were building something together. But Ryan noticed the fences grew taller too. Soldiers stood at the corners and watchtowers blinked through the night. At night, Ryan would sometimes lie awake and listen to the sounds of the camp. Somewhere someone always cried. Somewhere a machine always hummed. Sometimes she heard gunfire far off, like a memory refusing to fade. She asked Kira if the war was still going on. Kira shrugged. "They say not really," she said. "But they say a lot of things." The adults in the camp changed too. Their faces grew harder. Some stopped asking questions. Others started whispering about how long they had been there. Ryan once overheard 2 women argue about whether the humans had saved them or trapped them. One of them said, "They never meant to let us go. We're part of their plan." Rion didn't understand what that meant, but it stayed with her. One day, Sergeant Malin gave her a notebook. Write it all down, he said. Even if no one reads it, don't forget. Rian began to write small memories of her mother's songs, her father's smile, the way the rain on Dalis sounded like music on leaves, and she wrote about the camp, about Kira, about how humans were both kind and mysterious. As time passed, Rian grew taller, stronger, sharper. But one thing never changed. The camp was still called temporary. Yet it had a name now. Station. Haven 6. It had a functioning clinic, 3 school blocks, and daily drills for emergency evacuation. Rian laughed the first time she saw the sign. Temporary had become a city made of rules and warnings. Still, she waited. Waited for the promised return. For someone to say it was time to go home. For a message from Dalis. But none came. So Rian kept walking the same paths, listening to the same stories, trusting the same people who said they meant well. But deep down, even as a child, she had started to feel it. The promises were too smooth, too easy, and promises she was learning were just another kind of lie. The wind had changed. Rian felt it before anyone said a word. The sky above Station Haven 6 no longer seemed calm. There was tension in the air, heavy like the clouds that sometimes rolled in before a storm. People walked faster, soldiers drilled longer, rumors spread, like wildfire, whispers of ships disappearing, colonies falling silent, and the swarm returning stronger than ever. But no one gave clear answers. The humans still smiled, still said everything was under control. Rian had learned by now that smiles often covered fear. She was 13, taller now, and quicker on her feet. Her days were split between lessons at the learning center and long afternoons with Kira. The human girl had grown into a natural leader. She had dreams of flying, of leaving the ground behind and joining the stars. One day, Kira often said, pointing to the sky, "I'll fly faster than their fastest ship." Rian always laughed, not because she didn't believe her, but because Kira made the idea feel possible. They trained together in secret. While the younger kids played, Rian and Kira ran obstacle courses they built behind the supply tents. Kira taught Rian how to fall without getting hurt, how to climb quietly, and how to hold her breath longer than seemed possible. "You never know when hiding might save your life," she'd say with a wink. Rian didn't ask where Kira learned those things. She just listened, learned, and followed. Sergeant Malin had noticed them training once. Instead of scolding them, he handed Rian a dull metal blade and said, "If you're going to learn, learn right." His voice was gruff, but his eyes were kind. He never admitted it, but he watched out for them, always nearby, always pretending not to care. The warning signs came slowly. First, the supply ships stopped arriving on time. Then the communication towers began picking up strange signals. Interference, they called it. After that, one of the outer sensor posts went silent. Still, no one said the word. Not until a single shuttle crashed outside the camp, burned and torn. A survivor stumbled out, whispering only one phrase. "The swarm is here." Panic followed, but the Marines were fast. Walls were reinforced. Alarms were tested. Every child was given a small pack with food, water, and a beacon. They were told to carry it at all times. Rian clutched hers like it was a lifeline. Kira, though, was different. She walked taller, eyes sharper. She wasn't afraid. "They'll come," she said, "and we'll be ready." The first attack came at night. Explosions lit up the sky and the ground trembled. Rian woke to sirens and shouting. She grabbed her pack and ran outside, heart pounding. People scattered in every direction, some searching for children, others for weapons. The swarm was a blur. Dark shapes leaping over fences, limbs like blades, eyes that glowed without warmth. Kira found Rian near the storage bay, eyes wide with fear. "Follow me," she ordered, grabbing her hand. They ran past burning shelters and fallen debris. Soldiers fought at every corner. Rian could hear screams in the crack of rifles. Kira pulled open a metal locker and shoved Rian inside. "Stay here, stay quiet, don't move." Her voice shook, but her grip was steady. Rian didn't argue. The locker was dark and cold. Outside, the world sounded like it was ending. Ryan pressed her hands over her ears, but the sound still came. Gunfire. Inhuman screeches, and then something worse. Silence followed by a scream. Kira's scream. Ryan's breath caught. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She waited, counting heartbeats, praying someone would come. Hours passed, or maybe just minutes. Time didn't work properly in fear. Finally, the locker door swung open. Bright light poured in, and a Marine reached for her. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe now." But Ryan's eyes went past him. On the ground, not far away, was Kira. Her flight pack was smashed, one wing torn off. Her body was still surrounded by ash. Her hand stretched toward a fallen rifle she'd never reached. Her eyes stared at nothing. Ryan didn't cry. She couldn't. Something inside her was frozen. The Marine tried to block her view, but he was too late. Ryan had already seen everything. They moved her to a medical wing later that night. They treated a cut on her leg, gave her food, and wrapped her in a blanket. People whispered that Kira had died a hero, that she had bought time for others to escape. But Ryan didn't care about stories. All she wanted was one more laugh, one more training run, one more night watching the stars. In the days that followed, the camp was quiet. Fires were put out, debris cleared, new walls were built. People returned to their routines, as if rebuilding could erase what had happened. But Ryan knew better. Some losses never healed. Some truths stayed sharp. Kira had always said she'd never leave Ryan behind. And in a way, she never had. Ryan carried her now, in her memory, in the strength she'd taught her, in the silence that followed laughter. And deep in her heart, Ryan made a promise, not just to remember, but to become someone worth remembering. Ryan stepped off the shuttle and onto the training ground with nothing but a small bag and Kira's dog tag hidden inside her shirt. The air here was sharp and cold, biting her skin with each breath. All around her were other recruits, some younger, some older, but none looked like her. Most were human. A few were from distant planets she had only heard of in textbooks. But Ryan stood out. She knew it. And so did they. The base was called Fort Halvor, a name that echoed like thunder when shouted by the instructors. It sat on a windswept plateau, surrounded by snow-dusted cliffs and narrow metal towers. Every morning began before the sun rose. Every day ended long after it disappeared. The drills were constant. Marching, running, lifting, crawling, and always the same message from the instructors. If you think this is hard, the swarm will kill you faster. Trainer Holt was in charge of her unit. He was a tall, broad human with a voice that could crack stone. He didn't hide his thoughts. "You're slower than the others," he told Ryan on her third day. "Too soft. You won't last." Ryan didn't answer. She just kept going, even when her legs trembled and her fingers bled. Niam was the only one who spoke to her without judgment. He was quiet, observant, and from a desert world where storms lasted for weeks. They were assigned as sparring partners. At first, Niam won every round, but Ryan learned quickly. She studied movement, memorized mistakes, and kept pushing. After 2 weeks, she knocked him off his feet. He only grinned and said, "Took you long enough." The hardest part wasn't the bruises or the long hours. It was the silence. The time between training when memories crept in. Sometimes she would wake in the night and expect to hear Kira's voice beside her, whispering plans for the next day. But there was only wind and the heavy breath of strangers trying to sleep. Ryan didn't cry. Not anymore. She trained. She studied. She followed orders. Pain became a regular companion, and she welcomed it. Each ache in her body reminded her that she was still here, still fighting. Her instructors said she lacked natural strength, but she made up for it with speed and focus. She began winning sparring matches more often. She ran the obstacle course faster than most. When Holt saw her scale the tower wall in under a minute, he only grunted. But for the first time, he didn't call her weak. In the classroom, things were different. There, Ryan truly excelled. Strategy, field medicine, alien biology, subjects the others found boring, she devoured. Her mind worked like a blade, cutting through complex data. A field medic instructor named Ressa noticed and began giving her extra lessons. "You've seen loss," Ressa said one night. "You don't panic, that's rare, don't lose it." By the end of the 3rd month, she wasn't just surviving. She was improving. Her uniform fit better. Her voice grew stronger. Even her walk had changed. She moved with purpose now. Yet the ache inside her never left. It settled deep within, where no one could see. One morning during a simulation, her unit was ambushed. It was just a test, fake enemies, foam bullets. But someone froze. A boy from the southern systems. He dropped his weapon and ducked, paralyzed by fear. The others shouted at him, but he didn't move. Rion crawled through the dust, reached him and dragged him to cover. She didn't think, just moved. Later, Holt pulled her aside. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. "He's not your responsibility." Rion met his eyes and said, quietly, neither was Kira. She wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She didn't care about their approval. She had already made her choice. Every broken bone, every sleepless night, every scar was a brick in the wall she was building inside herself. It wasn't to keep others out. It was to keep herself steady. Ryan had seen what fear could do. She had lived through the worst. Now, she trained not just her body but her heart, to keep moving, to keep going, even when everything else told her to stop. Graduation day came under a gray sky. The final test was long and cold, a 2-day survival trial in the mountains. Ryan completed it with Niam by her side. They didn't talk much, they didn't need to. When they returned to the base, covered in ice and sweat, Holt handed them their marks with a nod. "You passed," he said. Somehow. Ryan stared at the small symbol on her uniform, a silver wing over a red cross. She was a combat medic, now. Her job was to run into danger, not away, to save lives, even when hope seemed gone. That night, she pulled out Kira's tag from where she had hidden it. She pressed it to her chest and whispered, "I'm still here." The base lights flickered as the wind howled outside. The war wasn't over. The swarm was still out there. But Ryan was ready. Not because she had forgotten, but because she had learned how to carry the weight. The battlefield was nothing like the training simulations. There were no clear lines, no helpful lights, no warning sounds before danger arrived. It was chaos. Smoke filled the air. The ground trembled beneath every step. Screams were drowned by gunfire, and the sky burned red from the engines of falling ships. Rian moved through it all, her breath steady, her hands tight around the handles of her field kit. She was a combat medic now, responsible for more than just her own life. The orders were simple. Hold the line. Save who you can. She had seen war before, flashes of it, echoes from her childhood, but this was different. This was survival in its rawest form. The swarm had reached them faster than expected. Their numbers seemed endless. They didn't fight like soldiers. They didn't retreat. They pushed forward, climbing over their own fallen just to tear through another line of defense. Every time one fell, 2 more took its place. Ryan had stopped counting how many she had seen in the last hour. All she could do was focus on her task. Her boots slipped through mud and ash as she dragged a wounded soldier to cover. The soldier's blood soaked her gloves, thick and dark. He whispered something, but she couldn't hear him. Her ears were ringing from the last blast. She didn't stop. She applied pressure, injected pain blockers, sealed the wound. The soldier gave a weak nod before passing out. Ryan looked around and moved again. Explosions lit up the night. Somewhere behind her, a tower collapsed, taking part of the perimeter wall with it. The swarm poured in through the gap. The Marines fought like fire, loud, wild, unbreakable, but even fire needs fuel. Ryan ran, ducked, tended to another fallen fighter. Her arms ached, her back screamed, but she refused to slow down. Then, it happened. A blast from behind knocked her forward. The world flipped. She hit the ground hard, her body twisting, something cracking in her side. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, she couldn't move. Pain crawled through her like electricity. When she opened her eyes, a swarm drone stood above her, its claw raised. She didn't scream. She reached for her knife, but it was gone. Then a shot rang out. The drone jerked back, then dropped beside her, lifeless. A figure appeared. One of the medics, a younger recruit named Solis. His face was pale, his hands shaking. He dropped, beside her, trying to stop the bleeding from her stomach. "You're going to be okay," he said, too fast, too desperate. "Just hang on, Ryan. The shuttle's coming." But Ryan knew that voice, that tone. She had heard it before, in different forms, with different faces. It was the same lie told by humans when they first arrived on Dalis. The same lie spoken by camp leaders, by soldiers, by everyone who thought comfort was better than truth. She didn't argue. She just watched Solis work, watched the fear in his eyes. The pain came in waves. It blurred her thoughts, made time stretch. She felt weightless and heavy at once. Someone shouted nearby. More figures appeared. Someone tried to lift her. She drifted in and out, flashes of faces, sky, smoke, blood. At one point, she saw the stars, real stars, not from inside a camp, not from behind glass, just above her, clear and cold. She thought of Kira, her voice, her laughter, how she had always promised Ryan that she'd be there. And she had been, until the end. Ryan's fingers found the 2 tags around her neck, her own and Kira's. They were warm against her skin like they carried memories. She clutched them tightly, holding on as the world grew quiet. She knew she might not wake up again. That thought didn't scare her. What scared her was the idea of being forgotten. A soft beep broke the silence. She opened her eyes. The medical bay was quiet, filled with white light and the low hum of machines. Her whole body ached. Tubes ran from her arms. Her side burned. She was alive. Barely. Solis sat beside her, his uniform stained, eyes red. "We made it," he said. "They pulled us out. We're safe now." But Ryan could hear it again. That lie. Not because Solis meant to deceive her, but because hope often sounded like a promise people couldn't keep. She didn't speak. She turned her head and stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the pain, trying not to think of the soldiers who hadn't made it. She could still hear the last battle in her mind, still see the broken bodies, still feel the ground shake beneath her. Later, they offered her medals, said her courage had saved lives, called her a hero. But Ryan didn't care about that. What mattered was what came next. When she healed enough to walk, she returned to the ruins of the camp. What little was left. There, among the rubble, she found a small child holding a ration bag, eyes wide with fear. She knelt down and smiled gently. "You're safe now," she said, her voice soft. It was the same lie she'd heard all her life. But maybe, she thought, some lies were just truths, waiting to be made real, and this time she would be the one to make it true.